The old rancher lay dying beneath the cracked wooden beams of the house he had built with his own bleeding hands. 50 years ago, the smell of dust, medicine, and regret, mixing in the stale desert air as the sun sank behind. The red hills like it was a shame to watch him fade, his chest rising in shallow, painful breaths while the bottle of medicine, his last, rested beside him on the nightstand, half empty and precious, because the doctor had said clearly there was only enough left for 1 more week, maybe less, and no more shipments were coming before winter sealed the roads. Yet even as death hovered near his bed like a patient vulture, his mind refused to rest, haunted not by fear but by memories of the land he had taken, the people he had ignored, and the cries he had once pretended not to hear. The ranch had once been native land, and though the papers said it was legally his, the earth itself seemed to remember another truth, one carried by the wind that whispered through the sagebrush at night. And it was on one of those nights, when pain drove him from sleep and guilt pressed heavier than his failing lungs, that he heard a knock at the door, faint but desperate, a sound so weak it could have been the wind. Yet something in his bones told him it was not. So he forced himself up, trembling, leaning on the walls as if they were old friends. And when he opened the door, he found her there, a native girl no older than 16, her skin pale with fever, her hair matted with sweat and dust, her eyes glassy yet burning with a strength that did not belong to sickness. And behind her the darkness stretched endless and cruel, as if daring him to turn her away. She collapsed at his feet before she could speak, and as he knelt beside her, ignoring the stabbing pain in his chest, he saw the signs immediately: poison fever, the kind that came from a bad root or a cursed wound, something only old medicine or modern drugs could fight. And he knew with terrifying clarity that without help she would not see morning. But the ranch was miles from town, his horse long dead, and the radio broken for years, leaving only one option: the bottle on his nightstand, the medicine meant to keep him alive just a little longer. And as he carried her inside, laying her gently on his own bed, his hands shook, not from weakness, but from the weight of the choice he already knew he would make. Memories flooded him then, memories of his father, telling him stories about savages, memories of fences built too close to sacred ground, memories of elders who had come once to ask for water and left in silence. And as the girl moaned softly, calling out in a language he did not understand, something inside him broke open, something long buried beneath pride and survival, and with tears stinging his eyes, he uncorked the bottle, measured the dose carefully, and pressed it to her lips, whispering words he didn't know if God would hear, telling himself that a life was a life, that mercy should not be weighed on a scale, and that if this was how he died, then at least death would find him honest. Through the night, he watched her fever fight and fall like waves against a cliff, her body shuddering, his own breath growing weaker, and more than once he thought they might both be dead by dawn. Yet somewhere between the pain and the prayers, he felt something else too, a strange peace, as if the land itself had paused to watch. And when the first thin line of sunlight crept across the floor, the girl finally slept, her breathing steady, her color returning, while the rancher collapsed into a chair beside the bed, smiling faintly, knowing he had given away the last thing keeping him alive, and believing, truly believing, that this would be his final sunrise. If this story already has your heart, if you believe that one act of kindness can echo louder than a lifetime of mistakes, then stay with us, subscribe to the channel, because what happens next, what arrives at his bedside the next morning, will change everything he thought. He knew about life, death, and the spirits that watch us all. Morning did not arrive gently. It came with a strange stillness that pressed against the ranch house like a held breath. And when the old rancher opened his eyes, he was surprised to find himself still alive, his chest aching fiercely, his vision blurred. Yet the sunlight spilling through the window felt warmer than it ever had before, almost purposeful. And for a brief moment he wondered if death had already claimed him, and this was some quiet afterworld, But then he heard soft footsteps on the wooden floor that did not belong to the girl. Footsteps slow, deliberate, carrying a weight older than the house itself. And when he turned his head, he saw a figure standing near the foot of the bed. Tall and wrapped in dark woven cloth, silver hair braided down his back, eyes deep and calm like still water hiding unfathomable depth. And before fear could rise, the rancher knew, in the way a man knows truth without needing proof, that this was a shaman, one of the old ones spoken of in whispers, a keeper of stories, bones, and breath. And the girl now sat upright beside him, no longer weak, no longer burning with fever, her eyes clear and steady as she looked at the rancher with something like reverence mixed with sorrow. The shaman spoke then, his voice low but carrying through the room, as if the walls themselves leaned in to listen, telling the rancher that the land had been watching him for many years, watching his choices, his silences, his regrets, and that the night before had been a turning point, written into the dust long before either of them were born, for the girl was his granddaughter, sent by fate, not by chance, poisoned while gathering roots meant to save another, and guided by the spirits to the one door that would open when all others would close. And as the shaman spoke, he revealed that the medicine the rancher gave was not just a cure for the girl, but a test of the heart, because true medicine was not measured in bottles, but in sacrifice. And when the rancher tried to speak, to apologize for a lifetime of wrongs, the shaman raised a hand gently and told him that apologies spoken at the edge of death carry weight only when matched by action, and that his action had already been heard. The shaman then knelt beside the bed, placing a bundle of feathers, herbs, and bone over the rancher's chest, chanting softly in a language older than fences, older than borders, a sound that seemed to vibrate through the floorboards and into the earth beneath the house. And as the chant rose and fell, the rancher felt something loosen inside him, something cold and tight that had lived in his lungs and blood for years. And he gasped as air filled him more deeply than it had in decades, pain retreating like a tide pulled by unseen hands, while outside the wind picked up, circling the house as if sealing a promise. The shaman told him then that the land remembers those who choose mercy, when no reward is promised, that spirits walk close to those who give even when they have nothing left, and that while death had been ready for him, it had stepped aside, not erased, not defeated, but delayed because the balance had shifted, and the rancher would live not forever, but long enough to set right what he could, to listen, to learn, to return water to dry places and silence to wounded ground. And tears streamed down the old man's face as he realized this second chance was heavier than any punishment he had feared, because it required living differently, loving differently. And before the shaman left, he placed a hand on the rancher's forehead and said that the girl would come back one day to tell the full story. But until then, the rancher must remember this morning whenever doubt returned. And with that, the shaman and the girl stepped outside into the light and were gone, leaving behind only the scent of sage and the sound of birds returning to the land as if they had been waiting for permission. The rancher lay there long after, breathing steadily, staring at the ceiling, knowing that this story, this single act of giving when it cost everything, had changed the course of his life and perhaps the land itself. And if you've stayed with this story until now, if you believe that kindness can summon miracles and that mercy can call even the spirits to your bedside, then subscribe to this channel, because stories like this are not just told to be heard. They are told to remind us who we still have time to become.